This video is going to show how to do the CopyCat Triscuit ad. So here in Photoshop is the original scanned JPEG, and the first thing that I wanted to show you was how to deal with levels. And this is not something that you're going to do right now, but I want you to see, at least for your final. So if you come into Image, Adjustment, Levels, it's the second one, and you click on Channel and you have red, green, and blue. If you go into red, you can see that the curve is far to the right. So you're going to bring the left in till you get a little bit of the curve, and bring the right in as well. Then you'll go into green and do a similar kind of setup, and then you'll come into blue and do a similar kind of setup. And that is a much more realistic color. It brings in the brightness and the right type of levels. And if you bring in window history, you can see the original scan, dull. Once adjusted to levels, more realistic coloring. So I've adjusted levels, and this is where you're going to start with. So it's called Triscuit Add Start Here JPEG. And the first thing that we are going to do is, this is similar to what yours is going to look like. So we are going to use masking techniques to bring in a Triscuit olive oil jar, some basil, some rosemary, and some tomatoes, and add some text. So you're starting here, and this is where we're going to kind of end with mine. So in your resources folder, you will see that you have some images. We are going to start with the tomatoes. Okay, so you're going to have a tomato image. So the tomatoes have a really great contrast. They have hard edges between the green and the red and the white. So you can use something like your quick selection tool and probably draw a pretty good edge around your tomatoes. Now, where you might need to come back in, you can hold Alt Option and negative out the little parts of the stems and green area. So I'm holding down Alt and Option and drawing back around the part that I want included. Now I'm holding down the Shift for a plus sign to bring back the parts that I don't want. You can choose with the negative to maybe, or the plus sign, to maybe get rid of some of the shadow that's happening between your tomatoes. Maybe kind of what's in the center there. Kind of bring back a little of the leaf. Okay, so once you have marching ants in your paths, it's always smart to go ahead and say make a work path. And once it's a work path, you click on it again to save it as a path. That way it's there and you don't lose it. This icon with the marching ants is going to bring it back to your marching ants. And on your layers palette, the piece of paper with the circle is your masking. You can click mask. Now you can see it did the opposite of what we wanted, right? So in history, you can undo one. You're going to go up and say selection, select, inverse. So now I have the opposite. Go back to my background layer, click mask, and now I should have just my tomatoes. So what I'd like you to do is say File, Save As, and you're going to turn your JPEG into a Photoshop layer. And what that is going to do, you're going to name it Tomatoes. Photoshop with layers, so that way if you need to come back and make any adjustments, you can. Then you're going to go to your selection tool, your arrows, and you can actually drag this right into your design. We know it's going to be fairly small about here. Click return or the checkbox to go ahead and set the layer, and you can see the layer mask came in with it. So now you can go in and anywhere, you can see that black is hiding it. So I go to my paintbrush, I have black. I'm going to go ahead and take a much smaller brush and make sure that I'm in my mask, not my picture. I can kind of brush away any of the white that's still showing. Now, if I screw up, and let's say I do that, whoops, I can switch to white and bring it back. And now if I come into black, I can erase. But it's not really erasing, it's just masking. So remember, I just have this mask, and anything that's black, it's hiding, and anything that's white, it's revealing. Just like if you took a piece of paper and cut a hole in it. Just like a mask that you would actually wear over your face. Okay, so you can come in and get a much smaller, and let's say we just kind of get rid of that white right in here. Okay, so our tomatoes look pretty good. So that's one layer. So I still have this as a JPEG, and remember JPEGs do not keep layers, so we're going to call this File Save As. Make sure it says Photoshop. I am coming into my examples, and this is Triscuit ad for how-to video, and then I can save it. Alright, so now it's saved. So now I can go ahead and close my tomatoes. So the next thing I'm going to bring in is my basil. My basil again has some great contrast. This time I'm going to try the magic wand tool. And you can see I just grabbed the white. I did pretty good. My tolerance was 1. Maybe if I call it 20 and select, that does even better. Now I can shift select to grab a little bit more in color. So my magic wand is grabbing colors that are similar. So I'm just holding down shift. It grabbed a little bit in the leaves that I don't want, so I can go to my lasso, hold down the Alt option, which gives me negative, and I'm going to subtract out where it's selected inside. Okay, that looks great. So now I click mask. Oops, did the opposite, right? So I can always go backwards, select inverse, mask again. I have pretty good basil. File, Save As, come into my folder, Basil for video, and again I can do a drag and drop right into my ad. So you can see it's really big, it's got great resolution, so I'm going to zoom out, which is Command negative sign, come out to the outside, hold down shift so that I don't stretch my basil. Into the middle and drag it back in. You can also make sure that you don't stretch it by clicking right here, this linking button that says no matter what I do, if I try to stretch it, it's going to constrain proportion. So you see it's always the same number for height and width once I push that. Return, so now that's there. Go ahead and say, you can see this little asterisk, which means I have done something and it's not saved. So I can say File Save, and now it will save that. I also have Rosemary, so I'm going to go ahead and open up my Rosemary. Again, it's beautiful contrast, so I can probably use my magic wand. It did pretty well. Come in, shift click, grab some other areas. Looks pretty good. Now I'll come in with my magic wand, subtract some areas by holding Alt option. Anywhere that I see that it grabbed colors inside that I don't want. coming around, grabbing all of those. Looks pretty good. I will select inverse and click mask on my layers. That looks pretty nice. You can see I got a little bit that I didn't want there. So I might come into my mask. Revealing is white, so I'm going to switch to my white foreground. Maybe slightly bigger brush. And I can make sure I'm on my mask. What's going on here? Oh, I went way too big. And I can kind of paint back in the part that I lost of that leaf of rosemary. And if there's anywhere else, like I can see right here, you can do a little touch up. Okay, so now I will say File, Save As. Rosemary for video. I'm going to go ahead and grab my rosemary, drag it over. I'm going to shift click to start to scale. That brings up this menu. Click it so that I don't accidentally stretch it. And place it in. Alright, so if I look at my original example, I have the tomatoes pretty big in the front. I have my basil, and then I have my sprig of rosemary in the back. So I'm going to try to copy that. So over here in layers, I have my rosemary. I'm going to bring it to the back. And with my selection tool selected, I can bring to the corner and I get that rotate, so I can rotate it up. So it's kind of popping up out. And if I look at my original, my basil is to the left and in the back, so I'm going to bring it to the back. I'm going to bring it to the left. So that's kind of a nice little... Now, if you look, something happened on mine that my basil, my rosemary actually has this kind of opacity going on. So what we want to do is in the mask, we want to select we're going to turn off everything except, and I'm going to try to grab, oh, nope, that's not going to work. How can we do this? So I can see, I'm going to go back to my original file. And if I do Command Option on, and actually I can go to this one and do that. Okay, so on my rosemary layer, I'm going to go to the mask, and I'm going to click Command and click that thumbnail, and it's going to grab just what's there, so the rosemary. Then I'm going to say Select Inverse, and that should be everything else, and we want it to be black. And what's really happening is it's like maybe 90% black here, so I'm still seeing a little bit of that white through. So now if I fill it with black, that will disappear. So I just filled everything that wasn't the rosemary with black so that I could hide that kind of opacity that was happening. Alright, so now we have our rosemary, our basil, our tomatoes, and that's the first step of this CopyCat Triscuit tutorial.